Hello guys, this is Spontaneous Movie Reviews and today we are talking about Napoleon. Napoleon from 2023 is the historical epic and drama based on the real historical figure Napoleon Bonaparte that came out last November and is directed by Ridley Scott and has a length around 158 minutes, which is just the theatrical version, as we know now that this movie will have a director's cut coming out in the soon future. Now, I'm not the most knowledgeable person when it comes to history in general, but most importantly in this part when it comes to Napoleon, because honestly, when I was at school, we had Napoleon in a very fast space of time, and this subject was really something that somehow our history teacher tried to just fast forward from start to finish. At least that's how my experience was at school with Napoleon, but it is what it is. I'm still gonna talk about this movie because I'm talking mainly about the movie here, and I'm not really gonna criticize the movie much on its historical accuracy. I know that many people did criticize this movie based on its historical accuracy quite a bit. I know that many people bashed it for it. Some people, for example, criticized that Napoleon was taller, and this movie makes kind of fun of Napoleon being quite small, which is actually, from my research, actually not true, because Joaquin Phoenix stands at around 173 centimeters, and Napoleon was believed to be around 168 to 170 centimeters. So Joaquin Phoenix is probably, just probably, maybe believed to be just 1 or 2 centimeters, or even more than that, taller than Napoleon. So I don't think that he was the wrong choice to go with because he was too small or anything. That was definitely not the case. But in general, like I said, I'm not gonna point the finger here and say that this was not historically accurate, this was not that or that. I'm really gonna criticize the movie mainly on just how I criticize a movie based on these foundations. I'm not gonna criticize it for things I'm not aware of or things that I just don't know. So, the script is by David Scarpa, who previously worked on All the Money in the World with Ridley Scott as well, and he also was part of the writing of the series The Man in the High Castle. Now, I do think that the script is quite smart, honestly. As we said before from the start, this movie is believed to have a director's cut coming out soon on Apple TV Plus. And obviously this movie is distributed by Columbia Pictures or Sony, and of course Apple TV Plus. And I am honestly surprised after watching the movie, and of course this is gonna include spoilers, so people who don't want to get spoiled on this movie, if they do not know the story of Napoleon, or if they don't want to know what's in this movie and whatnot, then please, I can only recommend you to not watch this review because I'm gonna talk about spoilers, so this is your warning. Honestly, I was surprised about the script by David Scarpa because I thought that he actually did a quite solid job on putting all these things together, from which the movie starts to where it goes, and every other historical event we attend in this movie and everything that happens here. Honestly, I thought it was pretty much all mixed together quite well. Even though you can definitely tell, and this is the biggest issue and the biggest critique I have with this movie, the biggest flaw of it, is that you can really see it's quite convoluted. It's not that easy to follow if you're not at least 100% concentrating. It really goes from place to place within a matter of minutes. and it really goes from place to place, like from scene to scene, in a very, I would say, fast pace. There are some scenes which take a little bit longer, but usually the movie really just flows in a very balanced, natural pace that just comes off to me, as at least personally, especially for a historical biography, it comes off as pretty fast. And I immediately recognized when I watched the movie that, well, okay, you're just immediately put into the action basically. And honestly, I did like that about the movie when the movie started, but it is becoming a problem when you're really trying to settle and you want the characters to build, and you maybe want to know more about the characters and just have more dialogue. You see most of the time Napoleon has all the political conversations and all the battle conversations with all of his people around there, but it's not really that much you know about him as how he is as a private person, besides his relationship with Josephine, which is played by the great Vanessa Kirby. And I have to say that here, and again, it's a very controversial take, I guess, at least not really a controversial take, but people really criticize this movie as well for Joaquin Phoenix's performance. I have to say I'm pretty much a big fan of Phoenix. I think he's one of the most talented actors around, and honestly, I was surprised with this because I did expect, I would agree that just like many people said, his performance was considered to be quite tired, maybe a little bit stiff, and maybe some people also mentioned that it was just very, I don't know, at some places too aggressive, just too one-dimensional, and honestly, I do not see that. And maybe it's just very subjective, because honestly, I've read so many opinions on Joaquin Phoenix acting the past few years on so many movies. For example, You Were Never Real Here, or also The Joker, or just Joker. And I've seen multiple opinions on his acting style that many people just have a very different opinion from the opinion that I have, because I thought his performance here was pretty much great. And honestly, I don't think it was one of his best performances when you go down his filmography, but I still would say that he really does an amazing job in this movie, in my opinion. And I still believe that Vanessa Kirby as Josephine Bonaparte was probably even the better part in this movie. I think she's done an amazing job in this. The only big issue here with the actors involved here is, I think the actors are not the issue, and I'm not gonna go specifically into the other actors, because I think the cast, all the side characters, all the side actors, I think done a very solid job. I would say that they all contributed to the movie quite well, but so I don't really need to go deeper into that. But the thing I would say is that when it comes to the dialogue between Napoleon and Josephine in those intimate relationship sequences and scenes, is that I thought the dialogue was written quite a bit one-dimensional, a little bit cheesy, just very cinematic, and this is just the type of stuff you usually see in Hollywood dramas, and it is a little bit cliched, but honestly, I didn't think it was that bad. I've heard many people say they thought it was cringe and very hard to watch, but honestly, I think the chemistry between Joaquin Phoenix and Vanessa Kirby is quite great in this movie, and I think, especially in those scenes which are definitely a little bit hard to watch, I think they've done an amazing job bringing out those emotions. And the only real issue is here, like I said before, the dialogue is a little bit cheesy and a little bit dull at times. I thought that they would have really it would have really helped if the script, in at least when it comes to the dialogue here, was a little bit more, I don't know, just a little bit more diverse, because all the time we see them together, all the time they talk to each other, we get either a fight or a conflict, or we get the other thing, and it's really too much of one or the other. And I think or at least I'm hoping that the director's cut brings more clarity into this, and maybe gets a bigger picture out of their relationship, because I think that's very important. Honestly, I did like the mix of those two views. Like, you have this one path which shows Napoleon on the battlefield, and also in general as a politic, and as a politician, and you have the other side seeing him as the husband of Josephine, and as the guy who spends time with her. And you have both of these paths in this movie, and I think they really done a great job blending them together. I thought it was never really taking me out of the movie. I was really having a good time with the movie, honestly. And but really, the big issue here is that I'm a big fan of Joaquin Phoenix's interpretation here. I do love his acting here. I think he did a great job, like I said. And I think, I guess, like I said, it's very subjective, but I saw quite lots of patterns to his acting here, which I've not have read mentioned anywhere else. And honestly, I just think sometimes people just really see one thing that they don't like, that they dislike, and they just, I don't know, it's like for some parts seem to be blindfolded for the rest of the movie. Because really, in some cases, it was the exact opposite of what I did read before going into this movie, which was quite surprising. The only big review that was actually, if I for another second just go out of this review on the movie, is um, one positive note here going into the movie was actually Peter Bradshaw's review from The Guardian he made for this movie, because Peter Bradshaw is generally a more critical critique, and honestly, there are many movies I would disagree with his opinion, but there would have also been quite many examples in the past where I thought his reviews were on point, and I absolutely agreed with him. And in this movie, he was probably like the only big journalist around there who actually gave the movie a 5 out of 5 star rating. And I was quite surprised, because I mean, his review was by far the most positive, and he said that Joaquin Phoenix is the key to all of this, and the key to all of this movie, that it works. And honestly, I do agree on that. I think Phoenix is the key to why this movie works, because at the end of the day, we're talking about entertainment, and we're talking about how such a real life biography put to screen, how it really gets you hooked. And I'm not necessarily the biggest, I was not necessarily that curious about the person Napoleon before going into this movie. Like I said before, I never really had him much in school. It was pretty much a fast forward story. And I didn't know some basics, of course, but after watching this movie, it was pretty much growing my curiosity out of the character, and I thought that is probably what such a biography should do with a viewer. And, you know, talking about Ridley Scott for a second, obviously, if you see this movie, like I said, the story, it has its issues. It's going way too fast from place to place, and it really feels like they wanted to put all these major real life events into one big picture, and I think that is the real issue here. Pretty much Ridley Scott suffers from the issue that he has to do a biography. If this movie would have been a fictional story like before, I honestly think he probably would have done a much better job, but he's pretty much fighting with himself to put all of these important events into the movie, and I think that is pretty much the biggest flaw of the movie, because it never really gets you into the enjoyment that you can just sit in the theater and say, I don't know, just sink into the atmosphere or really, really go with it, you know? I mean, in generally, I would say what I really liked about the movie, especially because of its fact that it's a biography, is that I thought it was refreshingly easy to watch. It was pretty much an easy watch. I don't know if this is subjective. I guess some people have a different opinion on that, but I honestly thought that the movie was really, really refreshing in tone. It was quite enjoying. I was quite enjoying most of the bits in the movie, and I thought that just what I liked about Phoenix's portrayal as Napoleon here is that he's pretty much not really that of a likable guy, but he's also not a guy I would absolutely dislike. There are certain parts to his character which I could understand, and I can just see where he comes from. And this is also a thing that I've read, that many people said that they don't really understand the character and they don't understand the actions and whatever. And honestly, I never had this disconnect. I thought that from start to finish, the movie draws a story from a character which I could understand. There was never really this disconnect that other people seem to have with his character here. And the movie was co-produced by Joaquin Phoenix as well, also by Kevin J. Walsh, who also worked on many other big movies. The musical score is by Martin Phipps. I was surprised to see this name because I've never heard of him before, I have to say that. He worked previously on some series like The Crown, Peaky Blinders, and Black Mirror, and I think he's done a very great job. I really like the composed score here, which was as well quite refreshing. I didn't think it was sounding like other historical biography scores. Normally with these historical epics, the music really, at least a lot of the time, sounds pretty much the same, very similar. But in this case, I really thought that the score was something different. It had something mysterious that I quite liked. And I thought he's done a great job. It is a great score, in my opinion. Not necessarily a score you would keep in your head, that you would remind again and again, but it's a score that was really working and fitting for the atmosphere, I think. The cinematography was made by Dariusz Wolski, which again has worked with Ridley Scott for numerous other other projects in the past. I think as well here the cinematography is absolutely on point. This is something I really cannot say any negative about. I think the movie looks beautiful. It has beautiful shots, visually stunning. The scenes on the battlefield are amazing, especially the scenes from the Battle of Austerlitz and Waterloo. I thought they've done a fantastic job, putting those battle scenes together. And even if there was some CGI in there, you barely notice it. It was really like the movie does feel quite great when it comes to those practical effects and set pieces, especially the production design by Arthur Max. I think this is really the big star of this movie, in my opinion. The set design and the costume design, but especially the production design. I thought, I'm pretty much surprised that the movie is not nominated for an Oscar. on production design. At least I think so, but I could be wrong. I could be wrong, and it might as well is nominated for production design. But if this movie deserves any nomination, it should have been for production design, in my opinion, if you ask me. So, like I said, cinematography, awesome, great job, beautiful pictures as well, like the production design. I think this is one of Ridley Scott's best looking movies he has ever made. And the thing on Ridley Scott, again, I need to talk about him. He gets quite some shit the past few years. Like his movies get quite a bit of backlash. I mean, the House of Gucci get quite a bit of shit. I cannot talk about this one because I haven't seen it yet. When it comes to All the Money in the World and The Last Duel, I thought they both of them were quite underrated, but especially The Last Duel was quite underrated. I guess, I mean, if you see the IMDb rating, I think many people still tend to really, really enjoy it and love it, but still, especially critics, I thought The Last Duel is pretty much one of the most underappreciated movies of the last decade or so, and I'm really honest on this. I was pretty much really hating it when this movie got shitted on so much at the Oscars. I remember watching the Oscars live, and they, of course, The Last Duel got no nomination, and it was really much shitted on by the Oscar host. I don't remember which host it was. Maybe it was the one with Chris Rock, right? Maybe it was not. I can't remember it. Maybe it was Jimmy Kimmel. I don't know, but it was just really not sitting well with me. Anyway, I think in general I have to give some credit to Ridley Scott because I think his movies in the past few years get a little bit too much shit, honestly. And I still think he's a magnificent director, honestly. I mean, Alien, Blade Runner, and Gladiator are three of my favorite movies of all time. I would never. I think the high regards I have for these movies are pretty much not unmatched, but there's pretty much next to no issues I have with these movies. And still, I think in the past few years, even though he's getting older, you can see many directors when they get older, they get a little bit lost with ideas. Director Ridley Scott is still a director who's really pretty much frequently making movies and always about a different subject. And honestly, I just really think we should just be grateful that he's still around doing these big ass movies because at the end of the day, you don't have to love his movies, but I think when we talk about the production, um, it pretty much always looks on point. It pretty much always looks great. And of course, when you go deeper into the movie, there come the issues, especially when it comes to writing most of the time. But I still think that he deserves much more credit when it comes to the past few years. And yeah, so the movie starts off with a scene where we see Marie Antoinette getting beheaded by a guillotine, which of course really happened. And now I do think this scene was fiction. At least I think it was not. I mean, not the beheaded guillotine scene. I mean that Napoleon was there as an attendant, because I think I've read somewhere that this was probably not true. So I guess this is more of an more of a perspective that maybe Ridley Scott wanted Napoleon to have in this movie. We also see it with Robespierre, like just a minute or some minutes later. Um, and I like these scenes, especially how the movie starts off. I think it's a great, really intimidating and pretty much raw scene that has quite the atmosphere. It was also a great choice that I think they did choose to not have compose music in the background while that beheaded scene appears. Pretty much great choice. I always like it when in those intense kind of scenes when there's no music. I think it's always pretty much a better choice for people to grasp attention, in my opinion. And, pretty much like I said before, I think the only big issue I have with this movie is, besides the dialogue writing in some parts of the script, it really does not explore the character enough at the end of the day. We go to way too many places from minute to minute. We attend all of these events, and the issue is that we want to know much more of his sides, and maybe just, yeah, especially when it comes to the relationship with Josephine. I think um, we want to know more about this relationship. We want to see more about that, and we want to explore more about the emotions. And this is really the thing where the movie falls a little bit flat because of its runtime, and which is weird because what I'm saying here is pretty much the movie is too short to put all this together, but this is really much the truth. And that is why I'm pretty much excited for the director's cut, because I really hope that it will give more clarity to the story here. And, you know, now the last big thing I need to talk about is the personal interpretation of the story and how Ridley Scott seems to view this character and seems to explain this character. And this is the one thing that I honestly never really read anywhere, which is kind of weird. I think that what I really, well, there's one little detail I've missed, which I still want to talk about. Like I said before, the plot is a little bit convoluted. It's a little bit too fast going from place to place. It has no real common thread, and that is really the big issue. It just doesn't feel like it has a common thread, not always coming through, at least. What I also didn't like, this is just some minor issues I have with the movies, is that it has subtitles to some characters, and I mean, letting us know who is who when it comes to some characters. It's just saying which character it is and what is kind of class is in the army or whatever, or in the politics. And I didn't like that. I always don't like this shit, because honestly, if those characters are so important, you have to tell me about them, or you have to give me some scenes where we get to know them by the name. But I hate it when they just, put a name down there as a subtitle, and then we just see a conversation, and now I guess we have to, keep all these names in the head, but that's just impossible. I think Oppenheimer, for example, also for a real life biography, did a much better job on this, which also came out last year. So the big thing, and this is the big elephant in the room, the personal interpretation when it comes to the character, and how Ridley Scott seemed to view this character, which I really liked actually, how he seems to draw him, is that he's pretty much explained by his love for Josephine. Because you can see in this movie that he starts off, at least in his private life, when you see him attending this dinner, or what it was, this where he first sees Josephine for the first time. He's quite shy, quite introverted, and he becomes more and more extroverted and more quite aggressive as well when it comes to her, but also especially when it comes to the public. But when he's with her alone, mostly, he's completely controlled by her, or at least he's just calm, and you can see that he's in a different place. He's feeling better around her, and you can really just see this, especially by the first scene when he first talks to her. You can see he's just instantly falling for her. And I felt that what I liked about it is that it all seems like, at least how I see it, this is just a personal interpretation, but Ridley Scott seems to view all of his actions and everything, how he is on the battlefield, and all his eager will to win all of these battles and to conquer all of this stuff seems to really be because he wants to prove it to her. And we most especially see that at the ending when he's obviously shortly before he dies on St. Helena, we also have the scene where he's on Elba on his first exile, when of course then Josephine is not feeling well and he is immediately just going and visit her. And I know that many people criticized that behavior because they just said, man, it seems like it makes him look like an idiot that he's just out of nothing, out of no reason, just going out of the battle and is just visiting her because she's more important. And honestly, I don't see that at all. Like, I don't see why he's an idiot, why he's putting all these things aside. I mean, at the end of the day, it's war. At the end of the day, yes, it's important stuff that he does on this battlefield, but you know, even a Napoleon be might be replaced by some other guy, even though that guy might not have the commanding power that he has. But honestly, at that moment, it seems to be that she's just more important. And, I mean, we pretty much have that in our minds at that point of the movie, that he's really just loving her and that she's just that important to him. So honestly, the most scene where I thought about the most after the movie is the scene when he's basically accepting his exile on St. Helena before he eventually would die years later, I guess. When he accepts it and when he writes that document, his name on that document, I just got the feeling that when Josephine would have been still alive to that point, he would have probably not taken it. He probably would have not accepted. He would have continued to go on the battlefields. He would have continued to just try to conquer France back. However, whatever, he would have tried it. At least that's my interpretation. But the thing is, you can really see with this movie that his will, he's eager to conquer all of this. It always really depends on her and his love for her, and that he just has the feeling to prove to her that he's powerful, that he has all of this force and all of this power. And I think that the one scene that really gave me that vibe, like I said, is that scene where he finally accepts his downfall, I guess, or he just accepts that he has to quit because she's gone and he has basically no one left to prove his power anymore. And that he's just accepting his destiny, he's just accepting it. And this is really pretty much the same thing, which is also weird, is that even though we see in the movie, very fast into the movie, that Josephine not necessarily seemed to really fall in love with him. She's just, she's liking him. She's liking his traits. But we see this conversation between her and I think one of her, one of her maidens or whatever. And I thought that pretty much, even though she doesn't seem to really fall in love with him, you could see eventually with this movie from time to time again that he still means a lot to her, especially when he's gone and he's not there anymore. She's becoming sick, and even though, of course, I mean, getting sick, I mean, we can put into why this happens, we can put into all kinds of possible reasons for that, but for me, from my personal perspective, this movie pretty much drew the imagination that once he was gone, even though she thought that she does not love him, she really kind of would have needed him. And at the point he was gone, she has no power left anymore. And she's getting sick, and then she dies. And then he comes back, realizes she's dead, and gets the story told by his then daughter. And this is also a thing which this movie did not explore enough, to which person he's actually talking here. And when he realized it, he's completely in shock, of course, and he's frustrated and angry. And then shortly after, we have the scene where he eventually would accept his destiny, and he does not have the power left in him, or he does not want to prove it anymore. And of course he says it's because of his patriotism, it's because he loves France, it's because he said that, and he said it in the past, but pretty much I don't get that point when you truly just see the character solely in all of this movie. I didn't get that point, honestly. I thought it was more of an selfish standpoint, I guess. It was not because he didn't want to do it because he loves France so much, because he loves his country so much. And this is something I pretty much really thought about long after the movie was over. And that is something I really, really loved about the movie, is that it explores meanings, or I guess perspectives, and puts things into all kinds of opened for interpretations and imaginations. And I really love when movies do that. When movies don't give you when movies don't tell you every little detail, so you have to understand this or that and this or that. And also, I have to add on this, which I haven't even mentioned before, the movie is quite funny. The dialogue, in some cases, is really entertaining. It is really humorous and quite funny. And in general, the movie has very comedic and funny moments. And for real-life biography, for historical epic, this is really rare. This is pretty much rare territory. So this is something I also liked. I thought that the pretty much the unconventional, quite weird tone and balance of the movie structure is something that I really loved and I really liked and appreciated. So, as I said before, we have a couple of weaknesses, we have all those strengths, and if I have to go on my rating now, on my verdict on this movie going out of this review here, I have to say that even though there are these big bummers, there are these big issues, definitely in the movie, but I think the movie gets way too much shitted on, and I saw, at least personally, I saw a much deeper movie, I saw much deeper characterization put into Napoleon than many people seem to have seen in this movie, and I really like that, and I really enjoyed the movie. So of course I will be giving it a higher note, especially because honestly all performances were great, visually stunning, everything on the production perfect, pretty much liked above everything. So my rating would be an 8 out of 10. Yes. Because eventually I wouldn't give it an 8.5. I mean, I'm not doing those half ratings anyway. But if I would give those point half ratings, I still wouldn't give it an 8.5. It's not that great, but I would give it an 8 out of 10. And with that, that is pretty much my review of Napoleon. I hope you enjoyed it. If you want to watch more reviews of mine, or if you want to support my channel, please subscribe to my channel, Spontaneous Movie Reviews. Would be very nice of you. And I hope you enjoyed it, even though this was a quite long review as always. And subscribe, and I would say we see each other in the next review or in the next movie ranking. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.